Jennifer Mitchell was a routine person. Every Saturday morning at 9 a.m., she'd stop at the McDonald's near her apartment in Houston, Texas. She'd order a large coffee and an egg McMuffin. The staff knew her. They'd have her order ready before she even walked up to the counter. She felt safe there. It was part of her weekend ritual. One Saturday morning in early spring, everything changed. Jennifer went to the bathroom as she always did. She locked the door, she sat down, and within seconds she heard something that made her blood run cold, scratching at the lock. Someone was trying to pick the lock from the outside. Her entire body went numb. She froze. The scratching continued. It was deliberate, methodical. Someone knew what they were doing. Then she heard it, heavy breathing. The sound of someone pressed against the other side of the door, breathing hard. Jennifer's survival instinct kicked in. She jumped up and started screaming as loud as her lungs would allow. She screamed and screamed and screamed. The sound of her voice echoing off the bathroom tiles was the only thing that made her feel less alone. Within 30 seconds, the assistant manager came running. The breathing on the other side of the door stopped. When they opened the door from outside, they found a man standing in the hallway. His name was Derek Foster. He was a regular. Jennifer had seen him dozens of times. He always ordered the same thing. He always seemed quiet and polite. In his hand was a screwdriver. Police arrived within minutes. When they questioned Derek, he gave a story about trying to fix a problem with the door lock. But why the heavy breathing? Why wouldn't he answer when Jennifer called out? Why did he run the second he heard her screaming? The investigation that followed was extensive. Police obtained a warrant for Derek's phone and his personal items. What they found was horrifying. Derek had hundreds of photographs. Some were taken through gaps in bathroom stall doors. Others were captured from angles suggesting he'd hidden the camera in the bathroom or women's changing room areas. The photographs showed at least 40 different women. Some of the women had been photographed multiple times. Over a period of 6 months, Derek had documented the faces, bodies, and personal information of dozens of customers at this McDonald's location and 3 other fast food restaurants in the area. But the photographs were just the beginning. Police found a notebook in Derek's apartment. It contained detailed notes about specific women, their names, their home addresses, their work locations, the days and times they typically visited. He'd followed them. He'd written down their license plate numbers. He'd documented their entire routines. Derek was arrested and charged with 17 counts of voyeurism, stalking, and attempted sexual assault. During the trial, it was revealed that multiple female customers had reported suspicious bathroom activity to the manager at least 3 weeks before Jennifer's incident. The manager never reported it to police. He'd simply told the women to use the bathrooms at different times. That franchise owner faced massive lawsuits. The McDonald's location underwent a complete security overhaul, but the damage was done. Jennifer testified at trial. Seeing Derek's face again in that courtroom triggered panic attacks for months afterward. She never returned to that restaurant. Years later, she still gets anxious using public bathrooms anywhere. The scariest part? Derek had photographed some women who never knew they'd been violated. They never went to that restaurant again, but they had no idea why their image was in a predator's collection. This story is the most disturbing of all. This isn't about accidents or a single predator. This is about systematic criminal operation that went undetected for years. A McDonald's location in Downey, California, located in the mixed residential and commercial area, became the center of a federal investigation that shocked the entire community. The investigation began with a tip from an anonymous source. Police suspected human trafficking. When authorities arrived with the warrant, they didn't find what they expected. There was no basement full of people. There was no obvious criminal operation. What they found was paperwork, mountains of paperwork, false documents, forged work permits, time cards that didn't match actual hours worked. The investigation revealed a sophisticated labor trafficking scheme. The McDonald's franchise owner, working with 2 assistant managers, had been systematically exploiting vulnerable workers, primarily immigrants with uncertain legal status, for over 3 years. Here's how it worked. Workers were recruited with promises of good pay and steady work. When they arrived, they were told their documents would be held by the owner for administrative purposes. Their actual working hours were never accurately recorded. They worked double shifts without overtime compensation. They were forced to live in a cramped apartment owned by the franchise operator, and they were charged inflated rent that they could never quite pay off. The workers owed money. Money for the rent, money for food provided by the owner, money for processing fees that were supposed to help with the immigration situation, except those fees never went anywhere legal. They were trapped in a debt cycle that had been mathematically designed to never be paid off. One employee, a man named James Reeves, who had gotten the job at the restaurant specifically to document what was happening, discovered that at least 15 people were trapped in the system. Some had been held in this situation for over 2 years. They were afraid to leave because their documents were controlled by the owner. They were terrified of being deported. They were isolated from family and friends. The working conditions were brutal. 12-hour shifts were common, 7 days a week, no days off. Medical emergencies were ignored. One worker suffered a severe burn on his hand from hot oil, and the manager refused to take him to the hospital. The worker wrapped it himself and kept working. When James reported his findings to authorities, the investigation accelerated. Federal agents raided the location and the apartment where the workers were being housed. What they found confirmed everything. 12 workers were immediately removed from the apartment. They were traumatized, malnourished, and showing clear signs of psychological abuse. The franchise owner was arrested and faced federal charges including human trafficking, labor trafficking, wage theft, and conspiracy. The assistant managers faced conspiracy charges. They were all convicted. But here's what haunts people about this story. Every customer who ate at that McDonald's during those 3 years was unknowingly benefiting from human trafficking. Every meal sold, every order taken, every transaction contributed to the operation. The workers were terrified. They smiled at customers. They took orders. They prepared food, all while being held captive. One woman who worked there for 18 months eventually escaped after connecting with the domestic violence shelter that helped trafficking victims. She gave an interview years later and described the psychological damage. She had nightmares. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't trust people in authority. She developed severe anxiety disorders. The building was eventually seized by the government. It was later converted into a community resource center. The workers received compensation through a settlement, but money can't erase what happened. Some of them never worked in food service again. They couldn't look at the McDonald's logo without feeling physically ill. David Hernandez was a reliable worker. He'd been employed at the Miami McDonald's location for 3 years. He knew every station in the kitchen. He could work the grill with his eyes closed. He was friendly with customers and respectful to his managers. One Friday afternoon during the lunch rush, everything changed in a single moment. The ice cream machine next to the grill station had been making a strange noise all week. A high-pitched whining sound that didn't sound right. The manager was aware of it. He'd heard the complaints from David and other employees. But here's the problem. That machine cost thousands of dollars to replace. The franchise owner had strict rules about repairs. Everything had to go through a corporate approval process that took weeks. So the manager didn't call for service. They just let it keep running, making that awful noise, hoping it would somehow fix itself. Around 1:30 p.m. on that Friday, David was working the grill. It was packed. Orders were flying in. The lunch crowd was intense. He was focused on the food, keeping up with the demand. He wasn't paying attention to the ice cream machine. Without any warning, the machine's compressor failed completely. It didn't break down slowly. It exploded. The compressor seized. Metal parts shot out like shrapnel. A metal cover came loose and flew directly into David's face and shoulder. He collapsed to the ground immediately. Blood poured from his face. His shoulder felt like it was on fire. Co-workers rushed to him. Someone called 911. The lunch crowd watched in horror as emergency responders arrived and carefully loaded David into an ambulance. At the hospital, David was diagnosed with multiple lacerations across his face and neck, a fractured cheekbone on the right side, and the separated shoulder. He underwent surgery to repair the separation. His face required 47 stitches. The investigation that followed revealed something infuriating. The ice cream machine had been serviced by a maintenance company 6 months earlier. During that service, the technician had written a detailed report flagging the compressor as having a serious structural failure. The report recommended immediate replacement. The franchise owner received that report. He read it, and he chose to ignore it because replacing the machine would cost money. So he let it keep running. He hoped the problem would go away. It didn't. It got worse. It exploded. David spent 3 weeks in the hospital recovering. Physical therapy lasted 4 months, but the psychological damage was worse than the physical injuries. He developed severe anxiety around kitchen equipment. The sound of a compressor running made him panic. His breathing would get shallow. His heart would race. He couldn't control it. He tried to go back to work after his recovery, but he couldn't handle it. Within a week, he had a full panic attack in the kitchen. He called his doctor and got a letter saying he couldn't work in that environment anymore. David resigned. His lawsuit against the franchise owner and McDonald's corporate office was settled for a significant amount, but the settlement came with strict confidentiality clauses. The specific amount was never released publicly. The franchise owner kept the location open. The machine was replaced. What David never fully recovered from was the knowledge that his injury could have been prevented. It wasn't an accident. It was the result of negligence and greed. Every day he looked in the mirror and saw the scars, he was reminded that someone chose money over safety. Officer Robert Martinez responded to the alarm call at 12:47 a.m. on a cold Wednesday night in Sacramento, California. The McDonald's location had triggered a break-in alarm, and dispatch had sent Robert as the first responder. He arrived alone, flashlight in hand, ready for anything. When he approached the front door, he saw it immediately. The glass was broken. Someone had forced their way inside. Robert called for backup and cautiously entered the building, his hand resting on his belt. The restaurant was dark except for the emergency lights casting eerie red glows across the empty dining area. Robert moved through the restaurant slowly, checking each section. The registers were intact. Nothing appeared to be stolen. That was strange. Why break in if you're not stealing? As Robert moved toward the kitchen, he heard something, movement. In the storage area behind the kitchen. Robert drew his weapon and moved cautiously toward the sound. "McDonald's is closed. Come out now," he called out. More movement. Then silence. When Robert opened the door to the storage area and turned on the lights, he found something completely unexpected. There was no burglar in the middle of a theft. There was a man, but this man wasn't running. He was sitting calmly on the floor, surrounded by boxes that had been stacked into a crude room-like structure. His name was Thomas Wilson. He was homeless, and he'd been living in the basement of this McDonald's for at least 2 months. What Robert discovered over the next hour was deeply disturbing. Thomas had created an entire living space beneath the restaurant. He'd used discarded boxes from shipping deliveries to create walls and compartments. He'd collected items from the dumpster and arranged them like furniture. There were blankets and a sleeping bag. There were bottles used as makeshift toilets. There were empty fast food containers stacked in corners. But the most unsettling discovery came when Robert found Thomas's notebook and his collection of photographs. Thomas had taken pictures, dozens of them. Some showed employees working in the kitchen, photographed through gaps in the basement ceiling. Others showed customers sitting in the dining area, captured from hidden angles. There were pictures of people in the parking lot, pictures of people getting into their cars. And then there was the notebook. Thomas had filled over 60 pages with detailed observations. He'd written down names, home addresses, work locations, license plate numbers. He'd documented the daily routines of at least 18 people. He'd followed them. He'd written down the times they arrived and left. He'd recorded where they went after leaving the restaurant. Thomas was arrested immediately and taken into custody. The investigation that followed revealed the full extent of his actions. He'd been living in that basement for over 4 months, not 2 months as initially believed. During that time, he'd stalked multiple people. He'd followed at least 7 women to their homes. He'd written down the addresses. One woman had no idea she'd been followed from the restaurant. She'd been photographed a minimum of 30 times. Thomas had written notes about her appearance, her schedule, and what he called her vulnerability. He documented her address, her work location, and the time she was typically home alone. When police warned her, she was devastated. She'd been going to that McDonald's for months, completely unaware that someone was watching her. Someone had been studying her. Someone had been following her home. The forensic investigation of Thomas's photographs and notes revealed that he'd been conducting surveillance on people across multiple fast food locations in the city. Over a year of surveillance, hundreds of photographs, dozens of victims who had no idea. Patricia Coleman was a concerned mother who took her family to the McDonald's near her home in San Francisco every other week. Her kids loved the Happy Meals. Patricia appreciated the convenient, familiar menu. She'd been taking her children there for 2 years without incident. Then her son got sick. It started with a fever. Then came the vomiting. Then the severe stomach pain. Her son, who was 7 years old, was hospitalized with a severe bacterial infection. Doctors ran tests and identified the culprit. It was E. coli, a dangerous strain. Her son required IV antibiotics and observation for 5 days. Patricia was devastated and angry. She immediately reported the incident to the health department in the McDonald's corporate office. She wanted answers. How did her child contract E. coli? The most likely source was food. Which food? Which meal? The health department opened an investigation. They inspected the McDonald's location and found multiple critical violations. The temperature on one of the refrigerators had been broken, causing meat products to reach unsafe temperatures. Food had been sitting out longer than safety codes allowed. Cross-contamination between raw and cooked foods had occurred. What Patricia discovered through her investigation was that this wasn't an isolated incident. She contacted other parents and found that at least 5 other children had gotten sick with the same strain of E. coli after eating at the same location within a 3-week period. One child had ended up in the intensive care unit. The franchise owner claimed ignorance. He said the refrigerator had just broken. He said it was an accident. He said the staff followed proper procedures. But when the health inspector looked at the maintenance records, something different emerged. The refrigerator had been flagged as having problems 6 weeks earlier. The issue was documented. A repair order was written but never completed because the owner deemed it too expensive to fix immediately. The owner had known about the problem, he'd done nothing, and children had gotten sick as a result. Patricia filed a lawsuit. She went public with her story. Local news picked it up. The story spread. The McDonald's location was shut down for 2 weeks for complete remediation. When it reopened, the company tried to move on. But Patricia didn't move on. She documented everything. She created a blog detailing the timeline of her son's illness. She named the specific employees and managers. She included the health inspection reports. She shared her family's pain with everyone who would listen. Her son recovered physically, but he developed an anxiety disorder related to eating. He was terrified of getting sick again. He had panic attacks at mealtimes. Years later, he was still dealing with the psychological aftermath. The franchise owner eventually sold the location. He moved on to own other McDonald's in different areas. The corporate office paid settlements to the affected families but continued to deny any knowledge of the refrigerator problem before the incident occurred. The evidence suggested otherwise. Patricia spent years fighting to hold someone accountable. In the end, money was exchanged, but no criminal charges were filed. No one went to jail. The system protected corporate interests while her son continued to suffer from the trauma.